Welcome to Reading the Room, a literary podcast featuring author interviews and discussions with bookish content creators. For today's episode, I am joined by bestie and frequent friend of the pod, CJ from the channel CJ Reads, and also the owner of Sunny's Book Truck, which is the coolest mobile independent bookstore you'll ever see, in my opinion. We checked out a bunch of most anticipated lists and picked 8 to 10 each to share with you today. If you enjoy Reading the Room, please consider joining the Patreon, where there's 2 support tiers. One is $3 and one is $5 to help me keep this thing going forever, hopefully. And also make sure you check out CJ's channel, Sunny's Book Truck on Instagram, and join her book club. Just check out the business, and let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone. CJ is here to join me to talk about our most anticipated books of 2023. We scoured a few lists, put together. CJ, you have 8 books, right? That you're on your list?
8.
Okay. I have 9, sort of 10. There's so many books that I'm looking forward to, but I wanted to whittle it down to a small list of my interests here. But we have these lists in publication order. So CJ, do you want to go first, and maybe we'll just bounce back and forth?
Mine's not in publication order,
Oh,
but
okay, never mind.
let me try. No, I think. Oh wait, I can do. I know the first one because we just talked about it, so I can do it. Yes. So there's many books I'm looking forward to in 2023, but I tried to find some that were a little bit more under the radar and not as obvious, even to me. I'm not gonna list the new Brandon Taylor here because, of course, I'm excited for that, but hoping this gets you into something new if you haven't heard of any of these and are a little bit more obscure. So the first one I am looking forward to is called The Guest Lecture by Martin Riker. It's out actually tomorrow and is put out by Grove Atlantic. So I came across this book kind of randomly. I was actually on the Dorothy Publishing House's website trying to find out what they're going to release. They release 2 books in tandem every year, always in the fall, but I can't seem to find what they're putting out this year. But I did some clicking around, and Martin Riker's website was linked out. He's one of the founders of Dorothy, and he's an author. So I believe this is his debut, which is interesting. And it is blurbed as being, with a voice as clear, sincere, and wry as any I've read in current American fiction, Martin Riker's poignant and startling original novel asks how to foster a brave mind in anxious times, following a newly jobless academic rehearsing a speech on John Maynard Keynes for a surprising audience. So I don't really know what that means. It has been blurbed by people that are much smarter than me, including Joshua Cohen, who won the National Book Award, I believe, last year for the Netanyahu's, and some other really cool people, including, what was that book we liked called? Christine Smallwood, who wrote The Life of the Mind. So it's been blurbed by some interesting people, and I think it's set in an academic setting and follows some middle-aged people having crises and being anxious and weird. So that's the first book I'm looking forward to.
It sounds really, really good. This one was sent to me by Emily Atterbury, who I think that's how you pronounce her name. She's an editor for Grove Atlantic, and she thought that I would really like this book, I think because of my DWM coverage. And Christine Smallwood, in her blurb, it says, "Abby's dark night of the soul left me feeling something I'd not felt in a long time. Hope." So I think we'll dig this. Very curious to see what this is all about. But the first one I have is not coming out until March 14th. It's Brother and Sister Enter the Forest by Richard Mirabella. This one is out from Catapult, which we love. And this one, Richard is an author that I followed for quite a while because I saw that his debut is coming out from Catapult, and he's queer and reads a lot of similar books to me and funny online. And I found his Twitter, and for I think a year and a half now I followed him, and it's finally coming out. I have not read it yet, but it says, "Opening like a fairy tale and ending like a nightmare, this cannonball of a queer coming-of-age novel follows a young man's relationship with a violent older boyfriend, and how he and his sister survive a terrible crime." So I think it's sort of fairy tale-ish, but also mixed with some realism, an abusive queer relationship, a brother and sister dynamic. I feel like it has a lot of things that sound promising, and I love supporting debuts, especially from Catapult. So that is coming. Oh, he's coming on the podcast as well. So keep an eye out for that in March.
That sounds good. I hadn't even heard of that one.
It has a pretty cool cover, which you can't see now, but it'll be here when we're watching this.
I'm going to pretend to react to it. Wow, that looks so cool.
They have a good cover game, so I think you actually will like it, maybe. We'll see.
Cool. Okay, so the next one I'm excited to read is Brutes by Diz Tate. It's out on January 31st, also by Catapult. And this is blurbed as being a surreal and ambitious debut novel written partially in first person plural and billed as The Virgin Suicides meets the Florida Project. Follows a clan of teenage girls in Falls Landing, Florida, as they grapple with the disappearance of the local preacher's daughter. Brutes' adolescent cast, time-jumping narrative, and promising of violence evoke the show Yellow Jackets. Mariana Enriquez calls it a beautiful and deeply strange novel full of dread and longing. So, I mean, that's like blurb catnip to me. I love the movie The Florida Project. It's probably like one of the most emotionally resonant movie experiences I've ever had. It's in my top 5 movies of all time. So that is definitely something that's sure to work on me. And I'm from Florida. So I love reading fiction set in Florida. Lauren Groff does it really well. A few other authors that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's a very rich place that is ripe for strange things to happen. I'm not sure I'm gonna love like the Greek chorus of We. I don't know if I've ever really read that many novels that do that, but I am interested in going along for the journey and trying it out with Diz Tate. So I'm excited for that one. Also another good cover.
Another good Florida writer is Laura Vandenberg, very much tapping into like
Yes.
the surreal oddities of Florida.
Also, this book is the February pick for the Sunny's Book Club, which is a monthly book club I run on Line. And if you're interested in signing up, it's still available within like the next 2 weeks. So would love for you guys to join and we can talk about it in real time. And Jalen is co-hosting it that month. So we will be reading it alongside each other and seeing how it turns out.
I am excited. Another one for me coming out March 21st. I think I have 2 books coming out that day. Yeah. So the first one is, I think it's Yes or No, Y/N by Esther Yee. It's coming out from
It's
Astra
your
House.
name.
Your Name. Okay. Didn't even know.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So it comes out from Astra House, who is a newer press that publishes really exciting fiction, also with great covers. They kind of give me Catapult vibes a little bit. But this one says, surreal, hilarious, and shrewdly poignant, a novel about a Korean American woman living in Berlin whose obsession with a K-pop idol sends her to Seoul on a journey of literary self-destruction. And this is something that CJ recently read, said it was wild. What did you think about it?
I really liked it. It's definitely a fever dream novel, like in that class of weird surrealist, like you're in another world while you're reading it. And I think she's doing incredibly interesting things in this book. Definitely felt really singular and makes sense that it was published by Astra House because it's just bizarro land. And I feel like they take more risks with the work they put out. And this, I think, felt risky and like new, which is always exciting to me. It's good. If you like the internet, fandom, and like parasocial relationships, you should read it.
I
But
dig
it's
it.
not too like cheeky and annoying. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
smart. It's really smart. It's doing some weird stuff. So the next one I have is called Francisco by Allison Mills Newman, which is out on March 7th from New Directions. Oh, you have everything. Though it garnered praise from Toni Morrison when it first published in 1974, Newman's autobiographical novel has long been out of print. Now a reissue by Redirections with a new foreword by Saida Hartman promises to introduce a new generation of readers to Newman's innovative and genre-bending story, which draws on the author's experience as a young actress in 1960s Hollywood. If it's good enough for Toni Morrison, it's good enough for me, baby. I am really loving. Ooh, fragmentary? Is that what I see?
Yeah, it's giving I flipped through this recently and it's giving fragments and kind of like poetic style in a sense. So I don't know. Should be interesting. Sorry to interrupt.
I love that. Yeah, I like musings on old Hollywood. I like glamour and fame. I think those are rich grounds for novels. And again, anything Toni Morrison backs, I'm gonna read it.
Right. It's always interesting when books like this that are older go out of print and then they randomly come back or they're reissued by a bigger press like New Directions. I wonder what goes into like that, how that happens, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely a theme in my reading this year. I have this one and then another one from McNally Editions that I'm going to talk about later. But I'm reading a couple McNally editions right now, and I'm really liking them. There's something interesting about our cultural trend right now of going back into the archives and, kind of republishing for new audiences. I don't really know what it means, but I'm into it and feel like it's definitely a worthy use of people's time.
Next up, I have Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. I was going to leave this one off the list because it's kind of like doing the Brandon Taylor, the Late Americans. Like, of course, I want to read this book, but I have to put it here in part because she's coming on the pod soon, which is really wild. I'm really excited for that. But this one, I pulled some questions that are put on her website for each of her novels. And for this one, it says, is it possible to escape history? Must we live our entire lives within a single life? Can we change the future by reimagining the past? Sort of understanding of this book is that it's about a widow going through her deceased wife's like belongings. She was an artist, a writer, and a shapeshifter, and she falls dead in her office. And this book is essentially this fictional widow creating a biography of her deceased wife. But I think it's doing some interesting things with like photography and art mixed through, sort of like a mixed media. I just know it's going to be a big brain to tell coming from Catherine Lacey too. So I have to read this week. So my thoughts will be coming soon, but I'm very excited about it. And it seems like new, weird territory for Lacey. So should be good.
I'm so excited to read that. I almost picked that up when I finished Trust by Hernan Diaz, but they seemed like kind of too similar in some ways, like a book within a book and like a narrative storytelling within a piece of fiction. And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to take some space of like how big brain Trust was to give Biography of X the time it needs. But knowing you're reading it next week, I might pick it up sooner than I thought so I can talk about it in real time with someone.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to buddy read that one because I think it's going to be one that we both love.
Also, a plug, if you haven't gone on Catherine Lacey's website, you have to. It is the funnest artist website I've been on in a long time and has a lot of like joy and levity and discovery in it, which I think is similar parallels to what's in her work. So if you want a taste for her work without the commitment of reading the book, I think it's a great snapshot. Next, I have August Blue by Deborah Levy on May 4th by FSG. So this is blurbed as, in Athens, a woman named Elsa glimpses her identical double. The other woman is buying two mechanical dancing horses. Elsa spends a month in pursuit of this enigmatic twin, a search that mounts to an uncanny erotic encounter in a summer rainstorm. Deborah Levy's August Blue is a story of split selves, wayward selves, femininities, sexualities, avatars, shadows, reflections, alter egos, and the twin poles of compassion and cruelty that exist within all of us. That sounds incredible to me. Need to know what a mechanical dancing horse is. Anyone out there, let me know. That seems like a very weird purchase, but maybe that's something that I just don't know in my tiny American brain. I love Deborah Levy's fiction. Hot Milk, The Man Who Saw Everything.
Yeah.
The other one I love, Swimming Home. I really like her fiction, and I feel like she's known for her living autobiography series, but her fiction is really worth it to me. It's some of like the most impactful reading experiences I've had in recent years, and this is no different. I am begging FSG to send me the review copy, please, God.
This one, so I've only read the first one of her memoirs called, I forget, it's the blue one. Um, this is, I don't know, I'll put it here. But basically, I did not love that, and I've never read her fiction, but I feel like she's an author that I should love. So I don't know if it was like timing or like what, I don't know what happened, but this one sounds really weird for her too, based on what I know about her work. Like it sounds kind of strange, which I'm enticed by, but
her fiction is really weird. Like, it's not, yeah, I would say that is something I would expect from her is weirdness and uncanniness in her fiction. And the first edition of the Living Autobiography series is the worst one, in my opinion. The one where she's talking about her childhood in South Africa, also not my favorite. The middle one is like perfection. The third is second place. Yeah, I guess that's just my another vote for you to read some of her fiction. And maybe it's this one because the themes seem interesting and up your alley for sure.
yeah, definitely. And I'm a hoe for a new release, so I'm sure I'll read this one when it comes out. But okay, what do I have next on mine? Okay, so I have This Is Not Miami by Fernanda Melchor. translated by Sophie Hughes. This one's out April 4th from New Directions. Fernanda Melchor is well documented on my channel, is one of my favorite writers. It's one of the most exciting and I think interesting writers that I've encountered since getting back into BookTube, and I'm just really excited by her generally. But this one is her first translated book of nonfiction. So it says it's set in and around the Mexican city of Veracruz. This is not Miami, delivers a series of devastating stories, spiraling from real events that bleed together reportage and the author's rich and rigorous imagination. So it's a collection of narrative nonfiction, and I'm very interested to see if it's a little bit more like sparse and direct in its telling, because in her fiction she's very much queen of run-on sentences, no paragraph breaks, just like a torrent of prose at you. And I'm wondering if she takes a different approach in nonfiction or if it'll be similar. I'm just really intrigued to see what she does in a different genre. So, and it's really brief as well. And I have the eGalley ready to go, and so I'll probably like binge that in one sitting soon. But yeah, I'm excited for it, and I love the cover. I think I sent it to you, CJ. It has like the lights, and it's like kind of abstract. It's cool. So yeah,
That's exciting. I didn't know that was a piece of nonfiction. I'm
yeah,
down. I wonder if it'll be like, I mean, it'll probably be less political than the Undocumented Americans, but it kind of sounds similar in tone at the same time. I can't think of anything else that sounds like that, so I'm excited to read that.
yeah. The next sentence, just really quick, it says it probes deeply into the motivations of murderers and misfits, into their desires and circumstances, forcing us to understand them and even empathize, despite our wish to simply label them monsters. So kind of similar to her fiction of looking at kind of people on the outskirts, bad people, I guess. That'll be interesting to see.
That also sounds like the blurb for Rogues by Patrick Radden Keefe, which is also that exact thing. It's like true stories of killers and like people on the outskirts. So,
Yeah,
that might be an interesting pairing to read those together.
for sure.
The next one I have is Diket by Jenny Fran Davis. It's out on May 16th by Henry Holt. In her blurb for Davis's debut novel, the writer Samantha Hunt tells me everything I needed to know. Like a tightly rolled spliff passed around the room, she writes, you inhale Diket. Following three queer couples on a 10-day country getaway, Diket takes on desire, debauchery, and destruction through a distinctly queer and propulsively entertaining lens. Can't wait. Sounds
True.
incredible. Yeah,
I
a
feel like
Samantha Hunt blurb.
yeah, I mean
Yeah, I mean,
that's amazing. And like I feel like we always read like at least one every year of like one of these weird like love triangle like debauchery novels. Like it was like Exciting Times 2020, like Detransition Baby last year. Like I feel like we always have one that we love. So hopefully this is that.
mm-hmm. And that other book I can't think of that also is about road trips.
By Joss Lake, is that
Yes,
what it's
Future
called?
Feeling. Yeah.
I did not read that one.
Yeah.
I okay.
Yeah. This sounds like a really similar setup. But that one was definitely more like dystopian magical realism kind of set in this weird future. But I'm excited for this book. I love a road trip novel and sounds up my alley. Distinctly queer. Let's do it.
Next up, I have a book that I'm currently reading. I've been reading it for like 2 weeks, taking it very slow. It's Monsters by Claire Dederer. This one's out April 25th from Knopf. This one is a piece of nonfiction, basically tackling very directly the longstanding debate of can we separate the art from the artist? And I'm really digging this. This is a question that I constantly think about in the group chat. We're always talking about this issue. And what I like about this book so far is that it's not really a didactic or overly like taking a stance on the issue. It's very much like a personal reckoning with herself about why she's thought certain things about certain artists and when she's been able to separate it versus when she couldn't, and like why that is, whether it's based on the crime that the artist committed versus the quality of the art. Like, is there an equation that can be built out of that? It's a very much like self-interrogative inquiry into this question. I'm really digging it. I'm only like 20% into it, but I'm really digging it. So I think that'll be one that many people will talk about. Could be a really fun book club moment as well. If you need something to, it's kind of like juicy and morally gray. So that is Monsters.
It sounds so good. Next up, I am excited to read South by Babak Lakomi. This is out on August 15th by Rare Machines, which I think is an indie pub that I've never heard of before. So already intrigued. This is a weird little book. It's described as South is a haunting and hallucinatory reimagination of a life in a world under totalitarianism and an individual's quest for truth, agency, and understanding. B, a journalist, travels to the south of an unnamed desert country for a mysterious mission to write a report about the recent strikes of an offshore oil rig. Yeah, it's described as being puzzle-like, filled with enemies. I think this is going to be plotty and surreal and uncanny, and all of those things I like in small doses. So this sounds great. And the real reason I was really drawn to this is because it's blurbs by Amina Kane, who wrote A Horse at Night on writing, and also Indelicacy, which are both two booktube darlings. But she describes this as South is as alluring as it is disquieting, with the strange and haunting visuals of an Andrei Tarkovsky film and the enigmatic feel of a novel by Italo Calvino. It draws you in: the sand, the sea, the editor, the publisher, the woman, the rig, the notebook, the ceremony, the wind, and then goes further than you dreamed it could. Yeah, it just seems a little mysterious to me, and I like some doses of weirdo dystopian climate fiction set in the desert. Okay, I'm down. Sounds good.
Yeah, for sure. And Amina Kane, like I have a list of blurbers in my head where if they blurb something, like I know it's gonna slap, and she's one of them. I feel very like connected to her taste as well. She directed me to Kick the Latch by Catherine Scanlon, and so now I'm like, and I love that book, so we'll be checking it out. Next, one of my most anticipated for sure is The Guest by Emma Klein. This one's out May 16th from Random House. And I don't really know much about this book at all, other than that it's by Emma Klein. I love her. Her story collection, Daddy, is one of my all-time favorites. Really got me into short stories back in like 2020. And yeah, this one, I pulled just a brief sentence. It says, a woman pretends to be someone she isn't in New York. And I briefly like read over the synopsis, and it's kind of giving DWM vibes. So I think it's going to be something that I like, but I'm going to go into it sort of blind and just see where she takes me. She's a really interesting writer, and I like this sort of green and blue cover too. I was going to make the Reading the Room podcast art this style, but I didn't. I don't know why I said that, but I like it aesthetically. So we'll see.
Love
I
it.
should add, I've seen some kind of mixed things on this one already from a bunch of different people online. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm putting my faith in Emma to deliver a banger, but we'll see.
Yeah, I am too. I think she is in a hard position from her commercial success of The Girls, and I don't really know if that's kind of the writer she actually is. Like based on her short story collection, she's weirder than that. So I'm hoping this book is weird, and maybe that is kind of the blurbering of critique we've heard so far is people thought they were getting another like Manson revival story.
So I think it'll be one to watch, and I'm sure there'll be some discourse around it. So it'll be fun.
Next up, I have Death Valley by Melissa Broder. It's out fall 2023. That's all I know, by Scribner. And this is the smallest blurb I have to give you. It's still a very mysterious novel. Death Valley is a novel about grief that becomes a story of survival in the California desert. A noir tour de force set in the world of hustlers from one of America's darkest and funniest chroniclers. So I will read anything she writes. We love some Melissa Broder. We're manifesting for the pod 2023. And I love books set in the desert.
This one's gonna be good. I'm suspecting, one because it's her, but also because I am an avid listener of her podcast, Eating Alone in My Car, which has been off air since like April of last year, and I don't know, I'm devastated by that. But there was a period in which following her father's death that she really documented very directly like her experiences with grief, and I guess this novel is really looking into that. And so I think based on her discussing the development of this book on the podcast, I think it's going to be really interesting and weird and very broader. So I think it'll be fun. Next up, I have another book that sounds very, very, very weird, and I'm excited for it. It's called Open Throat by Henry Hoke. This one's out June 6th from FSG. I think it's MCD, like their other imprint. I could be wrong, but this one says, a lonely, lovable, queer mountain lion narrates the star-making fever dream of a novel. So I saw this one on Twitter. Catherine Lacey, aforementioned, she blurbed it, and she was talking about it on Twitter, and she said she loved it. And then I remember like a couple weeks later, she responded to her own tweet and said, like, I'm still thinking about Mountain Lion novel. So I think it'll be weird, a queer mountain lion narrating, playing with gender, I think, and it's supposed to be kind of funny, fever dreamy, tragic. I don't know. I don't really know what to expect, but I like that I don't know that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I heard, well, I'm assuming actually that this is based on the famous mountain lion in the Hollywood Hills. Do you know about him?
No.
So there's this like very protected mountain lion that actually just died in the Hollywood Hills, and he was really old, and he had a name of, I think his name was like P50 or something. It was something scientific and like categorical to describe him from the people who were studying him. And um there's such a beautiful essay about him from the writer Aiden Narada, who has a really good Substack that you guys should follow. I think it's called Under the Influence. And it just describes LA's affinity with this mountain lion and the kind of impact it's had on, I guess I would say, like urbanism and ecological warfare and how those things relate to each other, especially in a place like LA, which actually has really rich biodiversity, but it's just been kind of ripped apart by industrialism and kind of urban sprawl at large. So I think this novel is inspired by that mountain lion.
I'm pretty sure. So the next sentence, I have like the whole synopsis. It says a queer and dangerously hungry mountain lion lives in the drought devastated land under the Hollywood sign. So I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it's influenced by that. That's interesting. And this one sounds very
Yeah.
you as well. Queer
Mhm.
and cli-fi, gender. Yeah, all the hot topics.
Gender.
Gender, love.
I love gender.
Yeah.
Okay, my last one is Rent Boy by Gary Indiana. It's out by McNally Editions. It's one of the republished lost classics that they're doing. And I couldn't find a release date with this, but it's kind of cheating because it already is released in the world because it's a republished book, kind of like that former one. It might already be out. So um, take all that with a grain of salt. This is blurbed as being set in New York City in the 80s, and everyone wants to be at the Emerson Club. From Cindy Crawford to Cindy Adams, from famous Roger, one-time lion of the talk shows, to Sandy Miller, the downtown writer with the tattoos and the leather. So it's following a man named Danny who works at this club, and he's waiting tables. And I think also when he's not working, he's chronicling kind of the sexual transactions that make up his life in gruesome detail. So to me, this kind of reminded me of that book you loved, The Sluts, this year, Jalen, by Dennis Cooper, I think is his name. And it's kind of just a account of a rent boy and turns into kind of a crime novel at the end. It's supposed to be outrageous, which I love as a blurb descriptor. So I'm excited to read this one.
Yeah, my bookster friend Jason just read this like 2 days ago and he loved it. And yeah, you're right. It sounds very much akin to that. Like I love transgressive, queer, dark shit. So I looked into buying this last night actually. So I'm glad that you put it on here. Because I'll be reading it soon. I think it's very short too. So I have two more. I'll go through them quickly. And then I have like one bonus because I have nothing really to say about it other than that I'm excited. So this one is Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This one's out July 11th from Scribner. And Sarah Rose Etter is an author that's sort of new to me, but I know many authors and books to people that I follow really like her, including Brandon Taylor, which I didn't know until recently. But anyway, so it says it's a surreal novel about a woman in Silicon Valley who must decide how much she's willing to give up for success. Perfect for fans of My Year of Rest and Relaxation and The Need. And so I think this one has some magical realism going on in it. It says further down in the synopsis, it says from her earliest memory, a miniature black hole has been her constant companion. It feeds on her depression and anxiety, its size changing in relation to her distress. So I kind of like how she's balancing this sort of Silicon Valley startup, kind of like very buzzy things that are in fiction right now, balancing it with this weird black hole sucking the soul of this woman. I think it'll be sort of akin to maybe Moshfegh, maybe some Melissa Broder. And I like the cover too. It's like a pomegranate. I don't know if you've seen that cover yet, but it's pretty sweet looking. So that's Ripe. Have you heard of this author before, CJ?
I just looked her up on Goodreads and I had the Book of X already marked as want to read. So I must have at some point, and it's also out by $2 Radio. The Book of X was. So that kind of makes sense why. Ooh, there she is. Kind of makes sense why it was on my radar because they're one of my favorite publishers. But that blurb you just went through sounded really up my street. So I definitely want to maybe prioritize her this year.
Yeah, and that's funny. On the Book of X, Melissa Broder blurbed it. Interesting.
The Book of X, the biography of X, something with the letter X going on this year, lads.
Right. Okay, last one I have is Witness by Jamel Brinkley. This one comes out not until August. This is one that I've seen floating around on Twitter, but I wanted to include a short story collection here as I love them. But this one, Jamel Brinkley is an MBA National Book Award fiction longlister or finalist, I believe. And it says, what does it mean to take action, to bear witness? What does it cost? In these 10 stories, each set in the changing landscapes of contemporary New York City, a range of characters from children to grandmothers to ghosts live through the responsibility of perceiving and the moral challenge of speaking up or taking action. And I included this because I, one, love the cover, as I keep saying, but also I love short story collections that are kind of looking at this question of actions taken or not taken, and how using that as sort of like the crux of a story to really land their endings tends to work for me in the short form. And so I just have a good feeling about this, and I've seen some buzz for it like on Twitter, and seemed like one to watch. People seem to be really excited about it, so I also am. That is Witness. And then the last one, just to quickly mention it, it's Rouge by Mona Awad, coming out in September from Scribner. I love Mona Awad, and she hinted at it on the pod with me, but I also saw her announce it, I think last month, and there's nothing really out about it, but I think it's going to be dark and weird and one that I cannot wait to read. So that is my list.
So many good books this year. It's kind of crazy. I know we just had our end of the year wrap up podcast where we were like, we want to read backlist, but who knows if that'll be possible.
Right. I'm glad that there's just a lot of stuff to be excited about. Yeah, I think that'll be a good mix though. I mean, do you think for your book club, what is like the goal, do you think, with books that you're going to choose? Are you going to try to blend backlist and front list, or just go with vibes?
Yeah, I'm going to try to blend it. I blended it last year. The March pick will be a backlist. Maybe I'll say it now. If you're a listening Sunny's Head, you'll get the inside scoop. It's going to be Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, which I've already read, but I think would benefit so much from a book club read because it is just like incredibly dense and layered and would only be great with more conversation around it. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to try to blend genres and backlist and front list and try to keep it varied, but kind of just follow my instinct more. I feel like I let people vote sometimes last year, and that resulted in some maybe weird trickiness for me of not loving all of the titles that were selected. But I think this year I'm gonna just follow my gut a little bit more and see where it takes us. Still experimenting, so we'll see what happens.
But thank you, CJ, for joining me today and coming up with a list really quick. But all right, thank you everyone for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye.